Welcome everybody and Cutoff artists to the basic walkthrough of the Cutoff Arts California Keys Contact Library. I'm Michael Scott, co-designer and developer at Cutoff Arts, and I'll be guiding you through this multi-series walkthrough of the basic features of California Keys. It's not intended to be a comprehensive, in-depth review of the sounds, but more of a quick walkthrough of all the features. But links to the actual sounds will be provided later. So, let's take a look. So now we're looking at the Clavinet D6. This clav is a Hohner D6 from the 1970s and was refurbished by Ken Rich of Ken Rich Sounds. The pickup positions are Arlen Oscar's own go-to proprietary blend. So first let's slide on over here to the ADSR envelope. ADSR stands for Attack, Decay, Sustain, Release. The attack is the initial onset of your note or your strike. Let's have a listen to what this knob or slider does. And what this slider is useful for is to tame some of the initial onset. If it's too strident, if the attack is too sharp, then you can move this up and take some of that edge off. It's also useful for creating special types of effects as well. If you want to create more pad type instruments, you move up the release as well. And I'll talk in a second about what this release slider does. Let's bring this back down to its normal setting. And what follows in time after the attack is the decay, and then the sustain, and then after you lift up off the note is the release. So let's have a quick listen at the decay portion of the sound. Now you're not going to hear any change until you bring down the sustain. This is more like a volume for this portion of the envelope cycle. And where you have this set. And this is more how much time it takes to go from your attack from here to this volume setting of the sustain here. So if you want to create more tight, plucky sounds, it's useful for cleaning up performances. If you have something really, really quick and you want to just tighten it up and bring these down to almost a finger snap in time. So I'm going to slide over to the last setting in the ADSR, which is the release. And I'm going to play the same riff so you can hear what's happening. And you see I've let up off the key, and the natural decay of the sound just continues to flow all the way through, even after you leave up off the key. Normally your settings would be somewhere in this position right here. And there you have the ADSR envelope. Let's take a look at the delay section of the clavinet. What you have here is the depth slider. And as it is the case in all the California Keys, effects, volume, or depth sliders or knobs, when you turn this particular setting or slider all the way to 0, it completely shuts off the effect. So just think of this slider as a volume knob for this delay effect. Let's have a listen here. And now I have the time knob, which is what we'll move on to next. The time is how quickly your delay taps will form to nearly instantaneous as you're fully counterclockwise. And as you move it, the taps become longer and longer. To the longest setting here. I'm going to leave it somewhat long and move on over to the damping knob. But to do that, I'm going to turn up this feedback knob, which should give you a little bit of a clue as to how that works. We'll touch on that in a sec. The damping knob, as the delay taps continue in time, get darker and darker as you turn this knob clockwise. So this is your typical sort of tape degradation effect over time. It's a very nice effect. Really nice fat delay here in this clavinet. So I'm going to reset the feedback. And I'm going to turn this damping down a little bit to to somewhat darker over time. And now we're going to have it fully counterclockwise, which the damping is completely shut off, and the decays or the delays as they tap over time will not be filtered. And so obviously what the feedback knob does is it will continue to feedback the delay taps back into itself and to recycle or regenerate each tap as you go more clockwise. So you can have them really short, or you can have these feedback taps continue nearly indefinitely. Let's take this back down. So I'm going to reset this feedback back up again so you can hear what the pan knob does. Is if you take a look at your output meters up here, you'll see that what the pan is doing is ping-ponging the signal from left to right. So here it's a bit more monophonic. Let's reset it and turn it up. I'm going to reset it completely, set to its full pan position, and hit that and let you hear it. Ping pong left and right. Very useful to get more stereophonic type sounds, especially as you turn this time. It's a little bit more stereophonic sounding. Let's turn the effect down. Much more monophonic. Without actually hearing the tap. Turn the damping up. Turn this time all the way down. Pan all the way up. Take the feedback down just a hair. And there you have the delay section of the Clavinet D6. All right, now we're going to take a look at the wah-wah section. A really, really nice, involved, funky wah-wah for your clavinet here. And the amount section is, again, basically the volume, depth, or overall amount of the wah-wah effect. And it shuts off as you turn it fully counterclockwise. All CPU dedicated to this effect. So we're going to turn this up nearly all the way so you can hear what's happening. Move right to the action here, the center of it all, the peak knob. And if Kontakt would allow this knob to move, which it does not in the direct interfaces here that you're looking at on the surface level, if this knob could move, it would be going back and forth, as I'm going to show you in a second here, the mod wheel, the LFO, and the velocity amounts that are all driving this peak. Peak is the center notch or lobe of most wah-wah pedals. So let's kind of have a listen as I just rotate just this knob here. And I'm going to turn the velocity down so we can listen to it without that. So you can assign this manually. You can assign the mod wheel to this knob, and I have that assigned, and I'll show you that in a moment. So this is the overall effect of the wah-wah. And you can affect this peak, and there, as I mentioned earlier, this peak knob can be affected by the velocity. So I'm going to move the velocity to wah slider to about, let's move it about halfway. And now you can still adjust this peak as you're playing, so you can get differing ranges of effects depending on how hard or soft you're playing. So I'm going to kind of bring it down to the lower, I'm going to use the word bassier side of the wah-wah spectrum. And I'm going to play slightly softer to slightly harder. I'll bring this up. So now we're sort of in the middle range. As I'm playing slightly softer to harder, bring it on up further still. Go way up there. And you can affect this amount also, of course, by the velocity to wah slider. So if the range is too broad as you're playing, you take it down a little bit, right to where it starts to feel good. And here, the LFO. This is basically a clock that will automatically move this peak setting. And if this knob could move, it would be going back and forth to show you what's happening. Have a listen to this. And they all interplay. So this LFO, this peak, and this velocity to wah knob, we'll bring it on down so it's a little more in the lower frequency range. So it's LFOing, or it's moving back and forth across the peak, and it's also being affected by my velocity setting. So here I'll play a softer note. Same chord, a little harder. And we'll move the slider up just a hair. Play soft. And now harder still. Move it up a little further. I'm going to show you the mod wheel. I'm going to turn this peak back up, and I'm going to move the mod wheel around a little bit. And you can see on the lower end of your screen here, down here by the keyboard, that I'm moving the mod wheel, and it's moving this knob right here, this peak knob right here. So you have a lot of control over this wah-wah section. Turn this amount down. So your dynamic range, we have a mountain of samples in this clav, from the softest to the hardest. So this will give you a more broad dynamic range. You bring the slider up, you have more quiet, softer notes. Now I'm going to play that same chord with this down. So this is the natural range of this clav, from the very softest the softest I can possibly play here, to the loudest. Now let's do that again and bring this velocity to volume up. Softest. It's almost impossible to hear. It's way down there. Playing really softly. So that concludes the velocity and wah-wah section of the Clavinet D6. All right, we're going to move on down here to the cutoff, punch, and spread section of the Clav D6. Cutoff is basically just a filter. What this does is it will take the top edge off your notes if things are too sizzly, if they're too bright. And when we get into the tube drive section, you'll see that they can be, although we have included a tame for that. We'll deal with that later. Right now, let's just have a quick listen to the filter, the cutoff. So you get slightly warmer tones. Sorry about that, my mouse is jumping around here. There we go. Basically, this setting right here, fully clockwise, is neutral, so there's no effect happening at all in this setting. And punch is a really nice and interesting effect. This will give you more bite and grab on the onset of the attack of your notes. In fact, we initially had this labeled as attack, but we thought it might be a little bit more intuitive to name it punch, because that's the actual name of the effect in the effect DSP engine of the Contact Clav D6. So let's have a listen to that. going to get real funky. So you can get real funky as you play down there in the lower end and the top end and really put some teeth on that particular effect. I'll turn this to a neutral setting. 12 o'clock is your neutral setting. And we're going to have a listen next to the spread. And spread is just a basic pan feature. It takes your lower notes down in the lower register and pans them to the left, and your higher notes to the right. So let's have a listen to that. And so there you had the cutoff, punch, and spread section. So now let's slide down here to the reverb. What we have here are vintage springs in short, medium, and long. In the plate section, we have Lexicon 4ADL, short, medium, long. Lexicon 4ADL, Hall, short, medium, and long. And they don't just get slightly longer as you step through them. I'm going to do that right here. They also get a little more lush, a little bit more depth and spatial information as you step through. So let's have a listen to the spring. And the next one. Next one. Step on up to the plate. The longest plate. And to the halls. Lots of nice, lush spatial information in these halls. Next one. And the longest hall. All right, now we're going to listen to the tube drive. Why would you put a tube drive on a clavinet? Well, because we can, and it sounds amazing. Check this out. This is your amount, obviously, and when you turn this all the way off, the effect is completely shut off. No CPU cycles dedicated to it. I'll turn the tame knob. This takes the high sizzle off. Get some really nice effects. I'm going to turn the wah-wah amount up. And I'm going to move the mod wheel with the distortion up. Let me take the LFO down. There we go. You get some really nice screaming effects using this tube drive. A funky phaser. Let's listen to that. Very typical for this era. Have these phasers around during the 60s and 70s for this clav. And we've included in this one, it is not included in the other series except for the Hammond speed and feedback control for the phaser. It's really nice. Speed goes faster as you go further on the knob. Bring this up. this down. And there you have the mighty Clavinet D6.